So the user AwesomeRants made what I thought was an excellent video called Kony 2012 and the Dangers of New Media. Her basic point was, well, she thought that the makers of the video were sincere and she didn't believe any of the conspiracies about them, that they used highly emotive tactics to generate a wave of Slacktivism, as she termed it. And by the way, I think that's a brilliant term. A wave of Slacktivism on social media like Twitter, Tumblr, Facebook, and YouTube. And she posed the question that what if this ability to generate a social movement through social media were used for bad ends? Now, I have to say that this is not a hypothetical. In fact, this was one of the very first movements that I noticed once online video and social media started to take off in roughly 2006. That's when we saw the widespread birth of the truth movement. And of course, it had been online for years, pretty much since September 11th. The thing about conspiracy theories is that they've been around for centuries now, and there were people waiting in the wings on September 10th to blame anything and everything that might happen on the government or the New World Order. So, of course, on September 11th, when things went down, there were people who were already, right there positioned to slot what happened into their overall worldview and explain to people that this was all part of a government conspiracy. But it wasn't until the birth of online video that you saw this explosion in people jumping on with this movement and it taking off and perpetuating it. And now the same discredited quote-unquote facts or arguments, talking points, have been regurgitated and echoed countless times on the internet, and it seems to have lost some of its steam and luster as people become more apathetic as time wears on. But that's only one example. I mean, another example would be Zeitgeist. Now, I promised at one point that I would do a review of it. I really don't have the time to do a comprehensive review, but suffice to say that I think it's highly misleading about economics and the Fed and that sort of thing. And during Occupy Wall Street, I saw a video from some kid screaming, and he was literally screaming in the street for nearly 10 minutes about end the Fed. And in the course of that 10 minutes, he said that money wasn't real and that they're just printing all the money. So it's really their money anyway, because they're the ones printing it, and that they're stealing our money. Which, I mean, you would think that, just thinking it over logically, that there's a serious contradiction to say that money isn't real, that it's all just made up, and oh, by the way, they're stealing it from us. I mean, it's like saying that someone stole my Monopoly money. Obviously, money is real and does have some value if you're morally outraged that they're stealing it from you. But where would this kid get such an oversimplification of something as complicated as economics? The internet. I want to post a video in the description about arguments against the gold standard. I think anyone who has even a rudimentary economics 101 knowledge would see right through this idea of the gold standard. It's completely ridiculous, but that doesn't stop thousands or tens of thousands of people from just regurgitating some garbage that they heard on the internet because it sounded persuasive. Creationism, I'm not sure exactly how many people are swayed by Kent Hovind videos. At least Venom Fang X claims to have been swayed by them, but that kind of garbage is out there. My point here is that this idea, what if it's used for malicious ends, it's already happened. And that is in part what is so distressing about new media, is that I can think of more examples in which new media has been used to propagate complete and utter bullshit than I can think of positive examples where new media has been used to spread something good. And even Occupy Wall Street, which I have mixed feelings about because really it was populated by people of so many diverse points of view that I couldn't possibly agree with all of them, was a movement that seemed to be generated by the internet and spawned off from that, blown up into the size that it was through internet slacktivism, and now, almost a year later, it seems to be completely irrelevant. It seems to have died down into nothing as time marches on, and people within the space of a year have already largely become apathetic about it. But I think that people's ability to make hay on the internet and generate a social movement gave people this great sense of political empowerment that really materialized into nothing. I know that doesn't sound like it makes a lot of sense, but it didn't materialize into anything. Let's put it that way. That would be a better way to put it. And I think that it is in part because people have become so enamored with this idea that they can be slacktivists on the internet and that they can change the world by posting some clever graphic on Facebook or ranting about something or what have you, that it really takes away from any sort of serious political action, and people have this incredibly false sense of empowerment through social media. And I feel that discourse in this country, especially political discourse, is just dominated by the retarded internet memes of our time. This is what is held up as deep political thinking, is some hatchet job graphic that somebody posts on their Facebook, which just makes some bold, over-the-top statement with no nuance and is emotive and oversimplifies everything. It's so unbelievably common nowadays that everything just seems completely trivialized. The anti-Obama thing is another example. The histrionics and fervor over Obama to the point where it's ridiculous, and people say these completely outlandish things that have nothing to do with reality and quote mine, distort, blow everything out of proportion. And there's an old saying that a lie can travel around the world before the truth has laced up its shoes, and the internet and most of new media, I think, is a perfect example of that we live in an era where people's thinking is dominated by bullshit they see on the internet, and they watch some fucking 20-minute or hour and a half documentary with this synth music playing in the background that's all scary and this low droning synth that's supposed to convince you that the government is evil. And people just run with it, and they scream in the street about end the Fed, and they are like, oh, we want to elect Ron Paul because he believes in the gold standard, when just the slightest modicum of knowledge of just basic economics would render most of these ideas completely absurd and irrelevant. And the 9/11 truth movement, there's plenty of examples of which the discourse in this country has just been driven to completely irrational, fact-ignoring histrionics through the social media memes and misleading internet documentaries. And the Kony 2012, I didn't even really pay any attention to that, but it seems like another example where even if the people were well-intentioned, that they resorted to highly emotive tactics to push people's buttons. So at this point, I'd like to recommend the book Amusing Ourselves to Death by Neil Postman, because he talks about the increasing triviality of the media, and he wrote, shortly after I was born, but with new media and the internet, it just seems to be becoming even more relevant. The sorts of things that he talks about have not in any sense gone away. They've only become amplified. And perhaps the only solution to the sort of dangers of new media is to inculcate the idea that you cannot be a well-informed person and, understand a subject basing your entire view off a internet documentary, and that people need to be much more skeptical and do a lot more research before they jump on the bandwagon and believe any of this crap. There's a difference between attempting to inform somebody and attempting to persuade somebody, and I think people need to be able to recognize the difference. And while they should be skeptical towards people who are attempting to inform them and to fact check and that sort of thing, they should be doubly skeptical when somebody is attempting to persuade. And when they're using music in the background, it's been said, I don't remember where I read this, probably in a book about filmmaking, but it's been said that something like 80% of the emotion in film comes from the music. So if you hear this sinister music playing in the underscore, or this really emotive music, understand that that is a tactic to manipulate you emotionally, and understand the difference between, as she said in the video, logos, ethos, and pathos. And if they're heavily relying on pathos, that should say something about what sort of tactics they're using and how much you can trust them and how much skepticism you should apply. I think that really that is a good tuning fork for skepticism, that skepticism should not necessarily just be applied equally across the board. When they're heavily relying on pathos or emotional appeals, then you should amp up your level of skepticism, because when somebody's trying to push your emotional buttons, it just might mean that their logic and credibility and argument aren't really there. So that's my opinion, food for thought. I would love to hear other people's thoughts on this and their opinions on the movements that social media has kicked off. Have a nice day.